Welcome to the Art of Data Leadership. I am Shayde Christian, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Cloudera. With me, proud to have Ray Kunik.
Thank you, sir. Ray Kunik, Chief Data Officer, and have been driving digital transformation for about 15 years now in Fortune 500.
Wonderful.
Pleasure to be here.
Good. Well, I want to ask you about that. This is all about Chief Data Officers. How did you get through the approval process? You're a Chief Digital Officer, is that right?
I am a Chief Digital Officer and have been essentially running digital in companies now for over a decade. So I've been at the inception of that movement.
Tell us, what is a Chief Digital Officer? How does that differentiate from a Chief Data Officer?
You know, I think about that, Shayde, and what a Chief Digital Officer is and what it isn't, and especially in the context of now with the emergence of data, right? And, you know, Chief Digital Officer is very, I would say, commercially focused more broadly across an organization. Digital leadership in an organization is really very front office oriented mostly on the growth side and really thinking through how are they taking transformation and technology enablement and driving everything from growth to innovation in a company. So a Chief Digital Officer is going to have a remit around owning strategy and digital assets globally, thinking about go-to-market planning and execution and technology enablement to drive commercial outcomes. And they're also really going to think through data and how they need to use data and work with various partners in an organization to really drive value and value creation with data as a huge asset in the company. And frankly, that's really where, if you look at these two functions, where some of the distinction is that the Chief Data Officer is really focused on driving data as a core asset and thinking about it as a core growth asset in a company, where I think the digital officer is a little bit more horizontally focused across the business and thinking through the customer journey and enabling marketing, sales, and service commercial enablement.
That's helpful. Didn't we have sort of a common beginning? Wasn't there a bifurcation along the way? How did your role emerge?
I feel like I've been on this roller coaster of an amazing ride since the first big sort of wave one, right? Or they call it the big .com boom, late 90s, really early 2000s. And I think, similar to what we're seeing today in this huge emergence of data as being a big commercial asset, the companies are really thinking through it in the context of AI or AI/ML. The internet and what it was driving in its initial inception was pretty huge. And so companies kind of evolved from the realization of the importance of needing somebody that has digital skills in the early 90s to, mid 90s to early 2000s, to then kind of evolving like, okay, the leadership kind of needs to be there. Maybe it's not just a specialized person, a webmaster. Now we actually need a digital leader. To really, in the last 10 to 12 years, the CDO title has really kind of taken off and been more commercialized and widely used. But then now we've seen within that too, a lot more specialization, especially on the data front. And I think that's where we've now seen some bifurcation of a CDO role into digital into data, right? And now you need specificity and ownership of data at an enterprise level, and someone that really has the remit to drive that and the value creation around that, as well as someone who's kind of thinking across the enterprise.
Right. You said something interesting to me about the horizontal nature of your role. Does that require and rely upon influence heavily?
When I think back in my career, the one thing that really stands out to me is this whole concept of EQ over IQ. And I think, you can have a lot of technology knowledge and specificity, you can have a lot of experience, but one of the most important things that you have to bring to the table is really strong EQ and influence in driving transformational cultural change. And my saying has always been transformation begins from within. And I really mean that in the context of at the individual level, up to the cultural level within an organization to really drive a transformative change. And so being a influencer, a cheerleader, a transformational agent, and being the change in an organization is really, really a part of the job that is probably the most important, is getting everyone on the transformational bus. Because traditionally, if you think about companies and how they came to be, and you take a step back and think about all of the legacy and process and culture that was there. Largely, a chief digital officer is really a transformational change agent in an organization. And that's really one of their core foundational remits that they have.
You mentioned change. There's this thing called AI. Are digital officers aware of this thing?
We haven't really heard of this whole AI thing yet. We're trying to figure it out. We've heard of information architecture, but artificial intelligence is maybe a newer term for us. But all joking aside, who hasn't now heard of AI with the emergence, clearly with OpenAI, ChatGPT? The world now has a tool and a use case at any level, of adaptation and scale that they can use. So that's now spilled into the corporate culture and really set the world on fire. And I can imagine a lot of folks who are watching this video right now are getting calls right from their boss or their CEO or the board saying, where are we with our AI strategy? And so any digital leader, whether it's a chief data officer or chief digital officer, is now really, pressed with the, okay, so what's my AI strategy and how am I going to implement that and drive outcomes that are, helpful to our customers and helpful to the growth and scale of the company?
How will AI change your chief digital officer role?
Well, here's the thing. AI has been around for a very long time, Shayde, so in my view, there's not much that changes, in my opinion, within a chief digital officer role or frankly, within the remit or responsibility of a chief data officer. It's really fundamentally focusing on the data, right? And kind of back to where I think some of these differences are between the roles, where I think a chief data officer is really heavily focused on, how do we think about governance, framework, the quality of data, insights and analytics around data, and then building cultural and transformational change in being a data thinking or data-centric culture. And where then do you turn to a partner who is very commercially focused on the digital side or the front office side of a company across marketing, sales, and service around enablement of that technology in an experience, or building relationships and retention with customers with really great data that drives amazing experiences. And I think that's really kind of where the opportunity lies here.
And what is the opportunity? How are you going to enable those units and executives and stakeholders that you support? What is AI going to do for them in your space?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, I think it's to some degree it's limitless, right? If you think about where all the application and scale can be of the technology. In its early adoption, you've seen everything in the sense of service with your customers and social response and chatbots, right? And that was a big part of kind of the play for a while. I think we've now transitioned and shifted even to more scalable and interesting models within the sales side of the business, with predictive, analytics, and really trying to understand what the customer needs, as well as, automating the process for them and getting a lot smarter to make the cognitive load less on them, with what they've potentially looked at in the past, what they've purchased, and already kind of give them guided selling with AI in that process, are just two big pieces that could, you can go after. I mean, you can even look at sales automation with AI and how you really leverage it to tackle your sales channels, where you would use AI maybe to handle maybe some mid to lower tier client management or less heavily engaged client management, where you kind of focus maybe your salespeople on the bigger opportunities, or where you need much more human to human interaction, and you can kind of automate some of the process and relationship management through AI with your customer base, and then use that even for acquisition. So a lot of opportunity in the space and a lot happening already, but the scale now, and I think the ability to get much more deeper in personalization or better in an experience with the customer to really differentiate your experience is huge. And I think that's where AI is really starting to show its value.
Speaking of AI, you and I had a very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed your analogies of what AI is compared to beekeeping, which is one of your hobbies. I found it very interesting, but I will admit to having been halfway through a bottle of wine. So I'd love to hear this sober and see if I find it just as fascinating.
Someone get some wine. So yeah, thanks, Shayde. I've been doing beekeeping now for about 3 years. And it's a fascinating hobby with a fascinating species that's been around for about 120 million years of evolution. So the code and the algorithms within the bee species is pretty impressive. And thinking about bees and how they're structured, they're very much a collective consciousness intelligence type of species. And if you think about what AI does and how AI has been programmed, there's a lot of analogies. And I kind of think of, 3 big ones from distributed intelligence is sort of one area to kind of talk about an analogy. The decision-making process of what the algorithms are doing in AI and how bees make their decisions. And then the other one I'm so fascinated with is this whole adaptive behavior, right? So, what's happening within bees real time that's adaptive. And so when we think about distributed intelligence and we think about what bees do, they're both have sort of this collective consciousness in the hive where there is a aggregate consciousness of what they're doing and needing to do as one hive together, but as individual actors, they're making their own decisions on what they need to do day to day. And when they get into decision making, there's everything from decentralized to centralized decision making. That's very similar in an AI context where you're having agents or multi-agents acting on their own behalf to learn something, but then collectively bringing back that intel, right, into the algorithm to learn and then perhaps make a different decision or learn to do something differently. Bees are very similar. Their ability to do that has been tried and true for 120 million years of evolution. And then you think about adaptive behavior, and this is the thing that fascinates me. Well, bees can learn things. They can learn patterns. They learn what to do differently given environmental changes or conditions that are variable to them in their environment. That's no different than various sort of agents acting very differently and being adaptive to circumstances, and then having machine learning or intelligence to think through and maybe come up with a different outcome that gets to ultimately the goal or outcome that they were programmed for. So all of that collectively is a fascination to me in looking at nature and the biodiversity of nature and its intelligent design to the intelligent design of AI, and where that applicability or alignment happens is just fascinating to me.
I love that. If it weren't already taken, maybe we should have called it BI.
I think BI would have been awesome.
I know
that's a pretty sweet term.
Oh boy, it's getting bad here. But at least you're finally trying to compete for Goofy. I appreciate that. So another thing that you and I talk about that you're really into, and I don't know if it's part and parcel of your studies with bees, but you're really into work-life balance, are you not?
I think the words that I like to use now are work-life integration, right? And I think that's been this term, and many of the folks that are watching who have sort of been in the corporate ecosystem for a long time, it's always been about work-life balance. And I always felt like it's really more work-life integration than balance. But that balance and harmony component of the integration is really critical, I think, to be a more effective employee and frankly, to just be your best self and be a more effective human being, right? And I think often we talk about doing things and it's not so much human doing as it is human being. And then centering in on that and really understanding, okay, well, how do I drive that harmony or balance in my life? And what are some of the things I need to be doing? And I think COVID has really helped in some ways, frankly, to think about the work-life integration concept, because you were really kind of forced, right, to unplug from an environment that you're typically in, have to adapt the behavior to a different environment and think through, how do I strike a balance now because I have everything happening, it's the world of 10,000 things happening in my home between family and work and other. And so where do I kind of find that balance in that ecosystem? And so I think getting centered on, disconnecting and taking the time out, even if I think I posted something on LinkedIn, shameless plug, please, jump on LinkedIn and take a look at my profile and some of the articles. But one of the things I have in the featured section is this amazing research on if you just go take a walk, a 20-minute walk can literally reset you cognitively. That literally helps you think through problem solving or if you're just having a stressful moment or you're feeling a little bit of anxiety, just the process of going through a walk and being outside and engaging in nature or in your environment a different way can have a cognitive benefit to you to help you, whether it's in a more calming, get the blood pressure down play, or it may be more from a, I need a breakthrough or to think through how I'm going to solve a problem a little bit more effectively. So just doing that is awesome. But I also think like making sure you're taking time to disconnect, making sure you're taking time to focus on yourself, to look at hobbies like beekeeping, right? And that's, I think a great way to go. But really taking that time to think through, what do I need to do to focus on me? How do I drive wellness within me? And how do I really drive the best self version of myself by finding the balance and finding these tools or taking the time and putting that structure into the week so that you kind of have that balanced integration of work life.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, brother.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.